The wind battered the windows of the mansion as if it wanted to tear them down, but Emma barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, tangled in dark thoughts that not even the luxurious decor of her living room could dispel. Thunder rumbled in the distance, mirroring the turmoil inside her. At first glance, Emma was the picture of success. Heiress to an immense fortune, her life had always been defined by luxury and privilege. But that night, as she watched the shadows cast by the fireplace flames, all of it seemed emptier than ever. She felt trapped, as though something essential was slipping away, despite everything she had. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, the storm outside or the heavy silence in her home. Then she heard it, a faint knock, barely audible over the roar of the wind. She stood up abruptly, unsure. Someone knocking at her door? At that hour, in this storm, it seemed unlikely. The knock came again, louder this time. Emma walked toward the door with her heart racing. Something inside her told her that opening that door could change everything, though she didn't know why. She took a deep breath before turning the handle, and what she found on the other side left her speechless. In front of her, drenched by the torrential rain, stood a man, looking at her with desperation. At his side, a small girl clung to his leg, shivering under a thin blanket that barely protected her from the cold. "Please, we need shelter," the man said, his voice broken by exhaustion and anguish. Emma didn't know what to say. The image of that man, exhausted and defeated, and the little girl clutching him, shook her. But part of her was filled with doubt. Who were they? Why were they there? In her world, people rarely asked for help without an ulterior motive. The silence between them lingered a moment too long. Emma sensed that the man was about to lose hope and turn away, but something in the girl's eyes stopped her. She couldn't ignore the fear in them. "Come in," she finally said, her voice barely audible. The man looked at her in disbelief for a second before stepping inside, carrying the girl in his arms. Emma led them to the living room, where the fire still burned, casting warm shadows across the room. The contrast between the opulence of her house and the misery of her guests was striking. "Sit by the fire. I can get you something to eat," Emma offered, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. The man didn't respond at first. He simply nodded as he wrapped the girl in a blanket Emma had draped over the sofa. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to help us." Emma remained silent, watching as the man and the girl settled in. There was something strange about him, a sense that he wasn't just an ordinary vagabond. His clothes, though worn, had once been of good quality. And his hands, though dirty, didn't seem like those of someone who had spent his life on the streets. "What happened to you?" she asked, unable to suppress her curiosity. The man looked up, and for a moment, Emma thought he was going to tell her everything. But then his eyes hardened, as if he had decided not to trust her so easily. "It's a long story," he replied, his gaze turning back to the fire. The mystery hung in the air. Emma didn't push further, but something in her instinct told her there was much more behind those tired eyes. She knew she shouldn't pry too much, but the intrigue had already taken root. That night, when she retreated to her room, she felt strangely restless. She couldn't stop thinking about the little girl, about how she clung to her father as if he were the only thing keeping her safe. And she couldn't stop wondering why the man had been so hesitant to share his story. Emma knew she had made an impulsive decision in letting them in. And though she wanted to convince herself that she was only offering temporary shelter, she couldn't deny that something about them had moved her in a way she didn't fully understand. She closed her eyes, but the feeling that something dark and complex was about to unfold in her life kept her awake long after the storm had passed. Emma couldn't stop watching Michael and little Lily, now wrapped in blankets, sitting by the fire she had lit hours before. The flames cast flickering shadows over Michael's tired face, who, though grateful, seemed to carry a burden much heavier than he let on. Lily, still exhausted from the storm and the cold, slept soundly, clinging to her father as if he were her only security in a world that was falling apart. Feeling more comfortable with the silence of the night, Emma finally broke the initial tension. Her voice was soft, but there was an urgent curiosity she couldn't suppress. "Michael," she began hesitantly, searching for the right words. "You said you lost everything. What happened?" Michael didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on the fire for a few seconds, as if the flames reminded him of fragments of a life left behind. His silence weighed as heavily as the room itself. Emma noticed how he clenched his fists slightly, a sign that the words he was about to speak were difficult. "It's not easy to talk about," he finally said, his voice breaking. "But I suppose you deserve to know, after everything you've done for us." He took a deep breath, as if preparing to open an old wound, and began to speak. "2 years ago, I had everything a man could want. A family, a growing business, and above all, Sarah. My wife. She was the center of my life." Michael paused, his voice cracking slightly as he mentioned her name, but he continued. "She was strong, brave, far more than I ever could have been. But one day, she got sick. Something unexpected and devastating. The doctors couldn't do anything. We tried everything, drained our savings on treatments, I sold everything I could to try to save her, but it wasn't enough." Emma couldn't take her eyes off him. The way Michael spoke, with a mixture of pain and resignation, moved her deeply. It wasn't just the loss of his wife that had shattered him, but the desperation of not being able to do anything about it. After she died, everything fell apart. Michael swallowed, struggling to maintain his composure. "My business, already in trouble from the lack of income while I cared for Sarah, finally collapsed. Investors pulled out, and within months, I lost everything. We lost our house, our car, and the stability I needed to take care of Lily. Since then, we've been surviving however we can. Sleeping wherever people will let us, finding temporary jobs, but never enough. The only thing that matters to me now is her. She's all I have left." Emma felt her chest tighten. She could see the intensity of Michael's struggle reflected in his eyes. Every word he spoke not only described a tragic past but also the unbearable weight of being a father, responsible for his daughter's life while barely managing to stay on his own feet. "And Sarah's family? Or yours?" Emma asked, hoping there was some thread of support in the chaos. Michael shook his head, his expression bitter. "There's no one. Sarah's family lives far away and never supported us. And I don't have anyone. I grew up in foster homes. I've never had a support network, I never had anyone." Emma, normally so rational and distant in matters that required difficult decisions, felt that this story was something she couldn't walk away from. The tears that Michael fought to hold back were a testament to a man who had hit rock bottom, but who was still fighting to stay afloat solely for his daughter. The room fell into a thick silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Emma knew she couldn't just do nothing. Not this time. Throughout her life, she had learned to be pragmatic, to avoid getting involved in other people's problems to avoid complications. But something in Michael's story, in the purity of his love for Lily, made it impossible for her to remain on the sidelines. She knew she had the resources to do something, but she also knew it wouldn't be an easy decision. "Have you tried finding work?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Michael sighed. "Of course. But as soon as they see my background, my recent failures, no one wants to take the risk. To them, I'm just another man who couldn't keep his life together." Emma nodded slowly, considering the gravity of the situation. She knew that if she made a decision based on compassion, she would have to face criticism from her circle, from her partners, from the people around her. But at that moment the external judgment seemed irrelevant. "Maybe," Emma began, hesitant, "I could give you a chance." Michael looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. She knew she couldn't promise more than she could deliver, but she also knew that her family business was large enough to accommodate someone with the determination she saw in him. "I have a family business. I could offer you a job, something stable. Nothing fancy, but it would allow you to start over, to rebuild. I know it won't be easy, and that criticism will come, but I believe you can do it. You need a chance, and I think you deserve one." Michael blinked, stunned by the offer. It wasn't something he had expected, and for a moment he hesitated, as if he couldn't believe that something good was happening to him. "I don't know what to say. I don't know if I deserve it, but—" "Lily deserves better," he said, glancing at his sleeping daughter. "If you're willing to take a risk on me, I won't let you down." Emma smiled faintly, knowing she had made a decision that would change both her life and Michael's. She wasn't sure what would come next, but something about this moment felt right. The following Monday, Emma arrived at her office earlier than usual. The morning air was crisp, and she tried to calm her mind, anticipating the difficult conversations she would have with her partners. She knew that the decision to hire Michael, a homeless man with a past marked by failure, would be met with skepticism. But she also knew there was more to him, something that drove her to trust her instincts. Ryan, her closest partner, was already waiting for her in the conference room. When Emma entered, he looked up from some documents and raised an eyebrow. "Is it true what I heard?" he asked bluntly. "That you hired a homeless man? A stranger?" Emma sat down across from him, ready to defend her decision. "Yes, I did. His name is Michael, and he has a difficult history, but I'm sure he has the potential to do good work." Ryan narrowed his eyes, clearly skeptical. "What are you thinking, Emma? This isn't a charity. This is your family's business. We can't afford to risk our reputation on emotional decisions. What will the investors think when they find out you've brought someone like him in?" Emma had known this kind of conversation was coming, but she didn't let her discomfort take over. She knew she was doing the right thing, even if her circle didn't understand. "Not all risks are financial, Ryan. Sometimes you have to make decisions based on something more than numbers. Michael deserves a chance, and if that means facing criticism, I'm willing to take it." Ryan watched her for a long moment before responding, and when he did, his tone was softer but no less firm. "I hope you're right, Emma. Because if this goes wrong, you could ruin everything you've worked for." Emma nodded, knowing there was no turning back. She had taken the leap, and now all that was left was to face the consequences. Over the following week, Michael began working at Emma's company. He was just another employee, but everything around him constantly reminded him that he didn't quite belong in that world. The expensive suits, the gleaming offices, and the discreet whispers of colleagues who couldn't stop noticing his presence made him feel like an outsider. Although Emma had been clear with her team about treating Michael with respect, the reality was different. From day one, he noticed the suspicious looks, the whispers behind his back. Despite his efforts, integration wouldn't come easily, and Michael knew it. He remained steadfast, focused on his work, and determined not to disappoint the trust Emma had placed in him. Emma watched from a distance, questioning whether she had made the right decision but knowing deep down that, despite the significant obstacles, something profound had changed, not only in Michael's life but also in hers. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe. As the days passed, although Michael seemed to be adjusting to his new job, the tension within Emma's company continued to grow. The rumor that she had hired a homeless man, with no recent experience, spread like wildfire among employees and partners. Emma, aware of the criticism, stood firm, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of every look and every malicious comment whispered behind her back. Michael did his best to stay out of trouble, focusing on his work with the dedication of someone who knows they have much to lose. However, small setbacks began to accumulate: missing documents, meetings he wasn't invited to, and passive-aggressive comments about his past. Emma noticed that these obstacles weren't mere coincidences. Someone was sabotaging Michael. One afternoon, the first significant blow landed. Michael walked into Emma's office with an air of resignation. He held a folder in his hand, and his slumped shoulders revealed that something wasn't right. "Emma," he began, closing the door behind him, "I need to talk to you." Emma looked up from the papers she was working on, immediately noticing the change in his expression. Michael, who had always tried to remain optimistic despite the difficulties, now looked defeated. "What's going on?" she asked, inviting him to sit down in front of her. Michael placed the folder on her desk and rubbed his temples, as if trying to gather strength for what he was about to say. "Something's happening," he finally said, his voice weary. "Today I realized that some important documents from a project I've been working on have disappeared. I can't explain it, but I feel like someone in the company is trying to sabotage me." Emma looked at him in silence, her mind racing. She had known integrating Michael into the company wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't anticipated such a direct attack. Although she had suspected some discontent among her partners, she hadn't imagined they would go this far. "Do you have any idea who might be behind this?" Emma asked. Michael shook his head. "I don't want to accuse anyone without proof. But this can't be a coincidence." Emma nodded slowly. She knew Michael was right. The situation was serious, but pointing fingers without evidence would only complicate things. She needed to act carefully. "I'll investigate this personally," Emma said firmly. "I won't allow anyone to treat you like this. If someone's trying to sabotage you, we'll find out soon enough." Michael looked at her, grateful but with a shadow of doubt in his eyes. "I don't want to cause you any trouble, Emma. I know your reputation is on the line." "It's not just my reputation at stake," she replied, looking him straight in the eye. "It's much more than that. You and Lily deserve a fair chance. I won't let this ruin it." The next day, Emma began investigating quietly. She decided to review the files and access logs for the documents Michael had mentioned. Her suspicions pointed towards someone within her own trusted circle. Although she had no concrete proof yet, she noticed growing tension among some of her partners, particularly Ryan, who had openly disagreed with her decision to hire Michael. Emma had a meeting scheduled with Ryan that morning. She knew he had always been a staunch advocate of rational, calculated business decisions and would see any emotional deviation as a threat to the company's stability. She decided to confront the situation head-on. "Ryan, we need to talk," Emma said as she closed the door to the boardroom where he was waiting. Ryan, sitting at the far end of the long table, looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What's the problem now?" he replied with barely concealed exasperation. Emma stood her ground. "You know as well as I do that there are people in this company who aren't happy with the decision I made about Michael. But what I won't tolerate is someone inside our own organization sabotaging his work." Ryan observed her in silence for a moment before responding, his tone much more controlled. "Emma, I know you've taken this situation very personally. But you have to understand that not everyone in the company sees Michael the way you do. Bringing someone with his past on board is, frankly, a risk for all of us." Emma crossed her arms, growing more irritated. "That doesn't justify treating him as a scapegoat. Someone is trying to make him fail, and I won't stop until I find out who it is." Ryan sighed, folding his hands on the table. "Emma, I'm only telling you this because I care about you and the company. You can't let compassion cloud your judgment. What if this turns out to be a mistake? If Michael isn't up to the task, we'll all pay the price." Emma stood up, unable to listen to Ryan's cold logic any longer. There was something more in his words, something she couldn't fully grasp. "Thank you for your concern, Ryan," she said, standing by the door. "But this isn't your problem. I'll handle it." Ryan remained silent as Emma left the room. His expression was inscrutable, but there was something in his eyes that disturbed her deeply. A few more days passed before Emma began getting answers. One afternoon, while reviewing the company's access logs, she found something troubling. Someone had accessed the key documents Michael had mentioned using an internal account, but it wasn't anyone Emma had considered a suspect. Her heart sank when she recognized the name on the screen. It was Ryan. Emma stared at the screen, unable to process what she was seeing. Ryan? The man who had stood beside her father, who had guided her through difficult decisions, who had been her mentor and closest partner. Why would he do such a thing? She felt her world begin to crumble. Ryan had been a pillar not only in her professional life but also in her personal circle of trust. The betrayal was unbearable. Determined to get answers, Emma confronted Ryan that very night. She called him to her office, her mind filled with questions and a fury she could barely contain. When Ryan entered the room, he did so with a calculated calm, as if he knew what was coming. "Emma, what's so urgent?" he asked, crossing his arms with an expression of feigned concern. She didn't waste time. "Why did you access Michael's documents without my permission?" she snapped, throwing the evidence on the table in front of him. Ryan didn't flinch. In fact, he seemed almost prepared for this confrontation. Slowly, he sat down in the chair opposite Emma, as if he wanted to take control of the situation. "Emma, you're not a child anymore. This is business, not a game. Someone had to do what was necessary to protect our company. Michael doesn't belong here, and everyone knows it." Emma felt a lump form in her throat as the mix of betrayal and anger hit her hard. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Protection? You call sabotaging someone's work protection? This is a betrayal, Ryan, she shouted, unable to contain herself. Ryan maintained his composure. It's a strategic decision, Emma. Sometimes, you have to make tough choices to save what matters most. Your compassion is admirable, but it's clouding your judgment. Michael is a burden, and he's already causing problems. If you let him stay here, he'll ruin the company's reputation, and in the end, he'll drag you down with him. You have no right to make decisions behind my back. This is my company. Emma fired back, her fury rising to levels she hadn't felt before. Ryan finally dropped his calm facade. Your company, yes. But you never would have kept it without me. I've been here long before you took the reins, Emma. Everything you've built is thanks to the decisions I helped you make. And if you don't listen to me now, everything will come crashing down. Ryan's words cut like a knife. The bitter truth of their relationship was coming to light. Emma had always known Ryan wielded more control than he should have, but she hadn't realized until that moment how deep his manipulation ran. I don't need you, Ryan, Emma said finally, with a coldness that surprised even her. You can consider this your last day at this company. Ryan looked at her, shocked, but quickly composed his expression. You're making a mistake, Emma. Without me, you won't last long. And when everything falls apart, don't expect me to be here to save you. With those words, he got up and left the office, leaving Emma alone with the weight of her decision. After the confrontation with Ryan, Emma was devastated. The betrayal of someone she had considered a mentor and ally forced her to rethink her vision of the company and the people around her. She knew she had made a difficult decision, but she also knew she couldn't allow someone like Ryan, who was willing to sabotage others for the good of the company, to remain by her side. Michael, for his part, remained unaware of the storm brewing within the company, focusing on doing his job as best as he could. But Emma knew the conflict wasn't over. If Ryan had been willing to sabotage Michael, others in the company might have the same intention. From that moment on, Emma had to be more cautious than ever. She could no longer blindly trust her inner circle and would have to rebuild her team from the ground up, surrounding herself with people she could truly rely on. Ryan's betrayal hadn't just shaken her, it had also made her stronger. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but she was determined to face it. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe. The atmosphere at Emma's company had shifted. Ryan's abrupt departure, after being discovered as the one sabotaging Michael, did not go unnoticed. Whispers spread like an echo through the hallways, and the tension among employees and partners had become palpable. However, Emma had made an irrevocable decision. She wouldn't let Ryan's betrayal or the attempts at sabotage tear her down, or her company. Michael, on the other hand, wasn't blind to this new atmosphere. He had heard the rumors, seen the suspicious looks, and felt the weight of judgment on his shoulders. From the start, he had known that his presence in the company would be an uphill battle, but he had never anticipated just how difficult it would be to remain steadfast in the face of so many eyes watching him as a potential failure. Despite everything, Michael continued to focus on his work, clinging to the opportunity Emma had given him. Yet the fear that it could all fall apart never left his mind. Lily was Michael's anchor in the middle of the storm. Every morning, as he dropped her off at the small school she had started attending thanks to Emma's help, Michael felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief, because his daughter now had stability, something he hadn't been able to provide for months. Terror, because he feared that at any moment, it could all disappear. He was afraid of failing, not only Lily but also Emma, the only person who had believed in him when no one else would. The problems at the company intensified. Without Ryan, some partners began to raise questions, insinuating that Emma was losing control. Investors, concerned about the direction the company was taking, started demanding more transparency and concrete results. Emma, who had always been seen as a strong and decisive leader, now found herself in a vulnerable position. The decisions she had made out of empathy for Michael were being questioned, and the weight of those doubts crushed her. One afternoon, after a tense meeting with the investors, Emma returned to her office, exhausted. The stress of the past few weeks was starting to take a toll on her health. She had barely slept, and the constant worry about the future of her company, and about Michael, kept her in a state of perpetual anxiety. "Emma, can I talk to you?" Michael appeared at the door, concern written all over his face. She looked up, surprised to see him. Normally, he kept to himself, trying not to interrupt her workday. But this time, the urgency in his tone was evident. "Of course, Michael." "Come in," Emma said, gesturing to a chair in front of her desk. Michael sat down, but he was visibly tense. For a few seconds, they sat in silence, until finally, he broke the ice. "I can't keep going like this," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "I feel like everything I do here is being watched and questioned. I don't even know if I'm helping anymore or if I'm just making things worse for you." Emma looked at him seriously. She knew Michael had been carrying a heavy burden, and the time had come for them to face the reality of the situation together. "Michael, I know it hasn't been easy," she began, choosing her words carefully. "From the very start, I knew this decision would bring complications. I knew there would be people who wouldn't agree with it, but we can't let them defeat us. Not after everything we've been through." Michael lowered his gaze, visibly conflicted. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me," he said, his voice cracking. "Lily and I have been through so much, but I can handle it. What I can't handle is the idea that you'll go under because you helped me." The fear and vulnerability in Michael were clear, and Emma felt the weight of his words bearing down on her shoulders. But instead of backing down, she found a renewed strength in that moment. "Michael," she said, with a firmness that surprised even herself, "if I've learned anything during all of this, it's that life isn't just about maintaining a reputation or protecting a company at all costs. It's about people. About doing what's right when it matters most. And I'm telling you, helping you and Lily was the right thing to do. I'm not going to let anyone make us feel otherwise." Michael looked up, his eyes bright with a mix of gratitude and guilt. He hadn't expected that level of commitment from Emma, and it moved him deeply. But it also filled him with fear. He knew the situation at the company was worsening, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the catalyst for those problems. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he confessed. "Every day, I feel like I'm just waiting for someone to take everything away from me again. I don't know how to overcome that fear." Emma understood the emotional weight Michael carried. The loss of his wife, the collapse of his business, the constant fear of not being able to care for his daughter, it had all left him deeply scarred. But she also knew that Michael had an inner strength that even he hadn't recognized yet. "You don't have to do it alone, Michael," she said softly. "I'm here, and I'm not giving up. But you need to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you. Lily needs you, and I need you to stay strong. Not because I can't do this on my own, but because I know that together, we can get through this." Michael nodded, his emotions raw and on the surface. He knew Emma was right, but he also knew that overcoming his fears wouldn't be easy. Still, in that moment, something inside him began to shift. The vulnerability he had felt since his wife's death and the loss of his former life was slowly starting to transform into a quiet determination, not just for himself, but for his daughter and for the woman who had risked everything for him. As the days passed, external problems intensified. Rumors that Emma's company was in trouble began leaking to the media. Investors, unsettled by the apparent lack of control within the company, started threatening to withdraw if they didn't see immediate changes. The more conservative partners pressured Emma to make drastic decisions, insinuating that the only solution was to cut ties with Michael. The tension climaxed during a critical meeting with the main investors. One of the most influential shareholders, Mr. Whitmore, spoke on behalf of many present. "Emma, with all due respect, this situation has gone too far," he said in a cold and calculated tone. "We all agree that your decision to hire Michael was a mistake. We don't question your good intentions, but the numbers don't lie. If you continue to bet on someone who, frankly, isn't up to the task, you could ruin everything your family built." Emma remained silent for a moment, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. She knew this was the most important crossroads of her life. She could cave to the pressure and fire Michael, which would surely calm the investors and stabilize the situation in the short term. But she also knew that decision would betray everything she had believed in from the beginning. "Mr. Whitmore," she finally said, her voice firm but calm, "I understand your concern. But I must tell you, Michael is not the problem here. The real problem is that this company has lost sight of what really matters. It's not just about numbers. It's about people. And I'm not going to fire a man who's doing his best just because that's what you expect." Mr. Whitmore frowned, clearly surprised by Emma's response. "Emma, you need to understand that our decisions can't be based on personal emotions," he replied. "We're talking business, not charity." "No, we're talking about leadership," Emma corrected, her gaze steady on Whitmore. "And a good leader knows when it's time to take a risk for what's right, even if it means going against the tide. Michael isn't just an employee. He's a man who's been through unimaginable tragedy and is working harder than anyone to rebuild his life. If I can't support him, then what kind of leader am I?" The room fell silent. The investors exchanged glances, some clearly uncomfortable with the situation. But Emma didn't waver. She knew that at that moment, she was gambling not just the future of the company, but her own integrity. Finally, Mr. Whitmore broke the silence. "Emma, you're betting a lot on this man. I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," she responded with conviction. "And I believe, in the end, it will be a winning bet." After the meeting, Emma stayed in her office, trying to calm the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had made her choice, but the consequences of that decision were still uncertain. As she stared out the window, watching the sun begin to set on the horizon, she heard a soft knock at the door. "Emma?" It was Michael, peeking in timidly. "Can I come in?" She nodded, welcoming him. "I heard what happened in the meeting with the investors," he said, sitting down across from her. "You didn't have to do that for me." "Of course I did," Emma replied, smiling weakly. "It wasn't just about you, Michael. It's about what you represent. This company has always been about money, power, reputation. But I want it to be more than that. I want it to be a place where people can find second chances. And you gave me that reason." Michael looked at her with an intensity he had never shown before. The gratitude he felt for Emma went beyond words. He knew that without her, his life would have taken a completely different path. Without her trust, he wouldn't have found the courage to fight. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done," Michael said, his voice full of emotion. "But I promise I won't let you down. I'm here to stay." Emma smiled, feeling an enormous weight begin to lift from her shoulders. Despite everything that had happened, she knew they had passed the toughest test. Together. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe. The sun had set over the city, and a cool autumn breeze blew softly, brushing against the windows of Emma's office. Outside, the streetlights began to flicker on, while the nightlife of the city came alive. Inside, the calm contrasted with the chaos and tension of the past few months. The conflict within the company had reached its climax, and while the effects of the storm were still present, the air now felt lighter. Emma leaned back in her chair, gazing out of the large window overlooking the horizon. It had been a long day, and though the meeting with the investors had been challenging, her resolve had left her with a mix of exhaustion and relief. She had taken a firm stand, defended what she believed was right, and, against all odds, had managed to convince the others that her vision for the company could work. Michael still had a long road ahead, but it was clear that the first step toward redemption had been taken. That night, the transformation of Emma and Michael would finally begin to manifest. Days after the confrontation with the investors, the situation at the company began to stabilize. It wasn't an instant change, but the whispers from employees and partners softened, and the investors, though cautious, decided to give Emma a chance. Her speech had not only impressed them, but it also revealed a side of her they hadn't known before, a leader with a clear vision and an unwavering sense of justice. For many, it served as a reminder of why the company had been so successful for so many years. Michael, on the other hand, continued to face challenges in his day-to-day life. Even though the atmosphere had relaxed somewhat, he still felt the weight of skeptical looks from some of his colleagues. However, something had changed in him since that conversation in Emma's office. He had made the decision not to run, not to let adversity defeat him. Every day, Michael found small ways to prove his worth. He became more proactive in the projects assigned to him, not only meeting expectations but exceeding them. He stayed late, studying the company's systems and processes to ensure there was no room for error in his work. But more importantly, his internal shift was profound. The insecurity that had accompanied him since his wife's death and the fall of his business began to fade. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he felt a renewed determination, a strength he had forgotten he possessed. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents, one of his colleagues, a man named Greg, approached his desk. "Michael," Greg said with a mix of seriousness and curiosity. "I have to say, a lot of us weren't convinced when Emma brought you in. Even I had my doubts. But I've been watching, and I think we've all noticed. You're doing a great job." Michael looked up, surprised by Greg's words. For weeks, he had felt the constant judgment of his colleagues, but these words were the first genuine acknowledgement he had received since starting at the company. "Thank you, Greg," Michael responded humbly. "I'm giving it my best. I can't afford to fail again." Greg nodded, offering a small smile. "I know. And I think you're succeeding. Keep it up." That small gesture, though simple, represented a significant shift for Michael. It wasn't just that he was earning the respect of his peers, it showed him that there was indeed a path toward recovery. As Michael advanced in his professional life, he also began to heal emotionally. His relationship with Lily, always strong, had deepened. For the first time since Sarah's death, Michael felt he could offer his daughter more than just empty promises. He now had stability, and although their situation wasn't perfect, he was building a new life for the two of them. One weekend, Emma invited Michael and Lily to spend the day at her country house, a secluded and peaceful place where she often retreated from the pressures of work. Michael accepted the invitation, knowing Lily would enjoy a day in the countryside. When they arrived, Emma greeted them with a warm smile. "Lily, I have a huge garden where you can run as much as you want," Emma said, addressing the little girl who was curiously looking around. Lily, always shy at first, gave a small smile and held on to her father's hand. "Can I really play there?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "Of course," Emma replied, winking at her. "It's all yours for today." Lily ran off toward the garden, while Michael and Emma stayed back, watching as the little girl enjoyed her newfound freedom. In that moment, Michael felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if, for the first time in years, he could breathe without feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Thank you for this, Emma," Michael said, turning to her. "Not just for today. For everything." Emma looked at him with a sincere smile. "You don't need to thank me, Michael. You've done the hard work. I just gave you an opportunity. The rest, you've earned yourself." Michael was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. "For a long time, I thought I didn't have a future," he confessed. "After losing Sarah, I felt like everything was over. But now, I see things differently. I'm starting to believe there's something more for us. Something good." Emma nodded, recognizing the depth of his transformation. "You're right," she said softly. "There is something more. And I think you're finally seeing it." In the months that followed, Emma and Michael continued working together at the company. The financial problems that had arisen from the conflict with the investors were gradually resolved, thanks to the strategic decisions Emma made to stabilize the company. However, what truly made a difference was the change in the company's internal culture. Emma's decision to take a chance on Michael, a man many had seen as a risk, became a symbol of something greater. The company began to be seen not just as a corporate empire but as an organization that valued people, that believed in second chances, and that understood success wasn't measured solely in numbers. Michael, who had once been a broken man, was now a respected figure within the company. He had earned the trust of his colleagues and proved that, despite his circumstances, he had the potential to make a significant contribution to the company's growth. Emma, on her part, had evolved as a leader. The experience had transformed her from a woman who felt trapped by others' expectations to someone who made decisions based on what she believed was right, regardless of the consequences. She had come to understand that true leadership wasn't about following established rules, but about having the courage to break them when necessary. Michael's growth culminated one afternoon when he was called into Emma's office for a surprise meeting. When he arrived, he found a small group of people, including some of the company's key partners. Emma was there, waiting for him with a smile on her face. "Michael, I've called you here because I want to discuss something important," Emma said as he took a seat. Michael looked around, clearly confused by the situation. "What's going on?" he asked. Emma took a deep breath before continuing. "In the past few months, you've shown not only your professional ability but also your personal strength. You've overcome challenges that few in this room can understand. And you haven't just proven yourself valuable to the company, you've inspired many of us. That's why I wanted to personally tell you that I'd like to offer you a leadership position on one of our most important projects." Michael stared at her, stunned. For so long, he had fought just to stay afloat, and now he was being recognized in a way he had never imagined. "Emma, I don't know what to say," he replied, his voice filled with emotion. Emma smiled, acknowledging the weight of the moment. "You don't need to say anything, Michael. Just keep doing what you've been doing. I know you'll rise to the challenge." The partners present nodded in approval, and Michael felt a surge of gratitude and pride wash over him. In that moment, he knew he had reached a point of complete transformation. He was no longer the man who had lost everything, nor the man clinging desperately to the last hope Emma had offered him. Now, he was someone who had proven his worth, not just to others, but to himself. That night, as Michael returned home, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. When he walked into the small apartment he now shared with Lily, he found her asleep on the couch, surrounded by books and drawings she had been working on. He sat beside her, gently stroking her hair, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt that things were finally where they should be. He had lost so much in the past, but he had gained something far more valuable, a new chance, a new life for him and his daughter, and the certainty that he was strong enough to face whatever came next. Emma, for her part, had also found a new perspective. She had learned that true success wasn't measured by financial reports or the approval of others, but by the ability to make a difference in people's lives. And she had discovered that, through her relationship with Michael and Lily, she had built something far more lasting than a company, a deep human connection. Michael and Emma's journey came to a satisfying emotional conclusion. Both had grown in significant ways. Michael, who had begun as a broken man, unable to believe in himself, had now learned to face his fears and overcome his insecurities. His transformation was profound, and while his life still held challenges, he had found the inner strength to confront them. Emma, on the other hand, had gone from being an heiress trapped by her family's expectations to a visionary leader who made decisions based on her own values. She had learned that true power lies in the ability to be compassionate and firm at the same time. Together, they had created a legacy that went beyond business, a legacy of second chances, personal growth, and the human capacity to overcome even the greatest adversities. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If Michael and Emma's transformation touched you as much as it did us, don't leave without sharing your thoughts. We'd love to hear what part moved you the most. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe so you don't miss out on more of our upcoming stories filled with emotions, second chances, and life-changing decisions. Every story has something special for you. And remember, the next story is ready to captivate you. Click now and keep enjoying content that will make you feel, reflect, and get excited right to the very end.